So welcome everybody to another Conversations with Scientists. Today we're going to be talking about getting funded and specifically focused on the funding that's most relevant to you guys, which is fellowship funding, but we'll also talk a little bit more if you guys are interested about funding in general. Today we have with us three experts. We're very happy to have them join us. We have Daniel Colon Ramos, who's Associate Professor of Cell Biology at Yale University. Many of you might know him. He's the founder of Ciencia Puerto Rico. At Yale, he studies C. elegans neurodevelopment. And he's somebody that has had a lot of experience with funding, both as a graduate student and a postdoc, and today as a researcher. As a postdoc, Daniel was a Damon Runyon Fellow in Cellular Neuroscience at Stanford, and he was also a recipient of the NIH Pathways to Independence Award, or the K99 ROO Award. So hi, Daniel. Welcome to the YCA Fellows chat. We also have with us Ms. Christine O'Brien, or Chris O'Brien, who is Director of Fellowship Programs at the Policy and Global Affairs Divisions of the National Academies. Christine is an expert in the topic of fellowship program. She's led various fellowship programs at the National Academies, and primarily she has worked with the dissertation programs, fellowship programs for the Ford Foundation, and also the postdoctoral Ford Foundation fellowships. And she leads a roundtable around best practices in fellowship funding in DC. So she really is an expert in the topic, and we're very happy to have her. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here.
Great. And finally, we have Dr. Alberto Rivera Rentas, who is the Director of Extramural Research Training Programs at the National Institute for Deafness and Communications Disorders of the NIH. Alberto was born and raised in Puerto Rico, where he started out with a career in academic research focused on toxicology and neuroscience. But he's been at the NIH now for a number of years, and at the NIH he has led many different training programs and fellowship programs. He's worked at NIGMS, managing a large portfolio of in research development award, institutional student development awards, and other fellowships. He was responsible for launching a number of important training programs at the NIH. And now he was just telling us he manages about 18 different training and fellowship programs at NIDCD. So again, Alberto is a wonderful resource for us in the topic of fellowships, and we're really happy to have him. Welcome, Alberto, to the conversation.
Thank you for the invitation.
Great. Okay, so I know you guys have a lot of questions about funding and fellowships, but one thing that I thought we would do is we would start out with a very broad and general question. And this has come out of some of the discussions I've had with several of you and some of the feedback you've given us. So I know that many of you, maybe most of you, are interested in academic careers, but whenever we look at, when we were looking at your IDPs, we found that a lot of you said that you weren't really interested in grant writing, or you thought that you wouldn't enjoy it. So I wanted to kind of open up the topic by asking our panelists, in your experience, how important is grant writing for an academic career? whether you're in an institution that's focused on research or whether you're in a more teaching focused institution, in your appreciation, how important is funding for that type of career, and why do you think that seeking external funding or fellowships might be important? I think I'll start with Daniel, if that's okay.
Yes. So I mean, I'll start by saying that I think that a scientist's job is to produce and to communicate knowledge, like to produce and disseminate knowledge. And grant writing, there are two ways of looking at it. Getting the grant is obviously the goal of grant writing, but the idea of sitting down and crystallizing your thoughts and being able to justify them and propose them in writing, even if you don't get the grant, I think it's a key aspect of just being a scientist. So developing those skills is crucial. Like if you don't make the time to think about your research in that context, it's going to be hard to draw a research plan that will allow you to be successful in achieving your research goals. So if you do that, then something that's going to fall out of it is that eventually you'll get better at it and it'll get funded. But I have to say that, like in my case, most of the grants that I have written have not gotten funded. But it has been frustrating, but I have benefited from every grant that I have written. And my research has benefited from every grant that I have written, even the ones that didn't get funded.
Great. Can I have a raise of hands for all the people that maybe had written grant writing as something that they weren't really looking forward to in their careers? Yeah, so hopefully some of you, maybe you don't want to all admit it. Hopefully.
Can I ask a question? Like, how was giving a public presentation on your science something that you were looking forward in your career when you first started in the lab?
Lena is saying.
I mean, show of hands, somebody that started in a lab saying, oh my God, I can't wait to be in front of 45 people that know more than I do about this topic, giving an oral presentation. Okay, I don't see any hands up. So then now, show of hands, how many people feel comfortable talking about your research topic right now? Couple of you, okay, not everybody, but a couple of you feel comfortable. I think I will place those two things in. I mean, they're skills, right? They're skills like they're communication skills. It's like writing a paper, writing a grant, preparing a presentation. I will put them all in similar categories of being able to crystallize ideas that you have and drawing out a plan to achieve it.
If I can add something, when I was in Puerto Rico, I don't know, but I love writing. For me, it was a challenge. I was like, my goal with the application from the first fellowship that I received, because my lab didn't have money for my project, so I had to come with my own money, was I'm going to make sure, I'm going to convince these people that I can do what I was saying, what I was going to do. And then it became like a habit, like a challenge. I can say it was tougher because when you are in Puerto Rico, your first language is not English, it's Spanish. So I had reviewers saying, I cannot understand the sentences, there are grammatical errors and stuff like that. You get everything under the sun. But at the same time, as Daniel said, you always learn something. And my reviews, I wrote over 200 applications when I was down there. But you have to love writing. It's not only communicating your science, but it's a way of living for scientists. It doesn't matter if you're in academia and research or in industry, because in industry, I had to write validation protocols when I worked for Abbott Labs. I had to write GMPs and STPs and you name it. So you had to write that stuff. And now at the NIH, you had to write program announcements. So, you know, writing about science is, if you're in science, that's an everyday job.
Thank you, Alberto. Christine, do you want to add anything to this discussion?
Yes, I'd like to say that for fellowship applications, you can ask for the comments the reviewers make on your application. And then you have something to go on in terms of reapplying. So that may be true for those who apply for grants. And I leave that to other presenters here to comment on that. But what we hear from those who reapply is that they do make adjustments when they choose to reapply in the Ford Foundation Fellowship Program. We have predoctoral, dissertation, and postdoctoral fellowships, and quite often individuals will receive the award when they do choose to reapply.
Great. So already, you know, we have a couple of points. You don't get good at anything without trying it and doing it. And you know, you get feedback, which is really, really important for the getting better at it part. And perseverance, like Alberto was saying, having that attitude is really important. Let's see, does anybody have a question among the participants? Raise your hand if you do. Omar, go ahead if you want to unmute.
Hi, can you see me? Yes. Hi. So my question specifically is about when you're writing, I know that, you know, each of our research is interesting for each of us, but for sometimes for reviewers, they say, oh, this lacks a little innovation, or it lacks some technique or something. So I want to know what tips can the panelists give us to make our research more interesting as well more fundable when writing a grant.
Yes, I was sure this was going to come up. So tips for writing a good fellowship application. Let's start with fellowship types. I'm sure Chris and Alberto, you have a lot of experience you can share with that.
In the Ford Foundation Fellowship Program, there are two areas where you speak about your depth of interest in a topic and also how it relates to you personally. There's a personal statement that you write, and you speak a bit about yourself and also your interest in science, what drew you into science, and also aspects of your personal life that relate. So I'm thinking of someone who wrote about a certain area of research that they wanted to go into because members of their family suffered from diabetes. So in their personal statement, they touched on that area, and then they picked up on it again for their proposed plan of research. And it was obvious that they had a very strong and deep interest in the topic, and that they were excited by it. They really wanted to do research that was going to not only benefit humanity, but also benefit their family personally. So that personal connection and the excitement in this subject area, it helps a great deal if that comes through in your fellowship application.
If Giovanna, it's okay if I say something?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of NIH, here's the deal with the fellowships applications and the career development award applications, which are different from research awards or applications because, and I consider that I'm more difficult to write because you're basically writing two types of applications. One of them is your research career development application, right? Is what you're going to be gaining from this fellowship in terms of your research career. And then you have the research project application, right? Which is your research project that you will be writing, and it's going to be supported, and you're going to be doing as part of your fellowship. And a perfect fellowship application will merge both applications that will show reviewers that, first, that you know what you're talking about. Second, that you have you have knowledge of the literature, so you can describe how your research project is going to be different and it's going to be moving the field forward in terms of innovation. And second, the same will be for, and that this project is going to allow you to not only learn new skills, but also apply those skills so they can see that how you're going to be moving forward. And it's another essential component of a fellowship application is that it should be showing the reviewers your pathway, where you're going to go. And that's important when for example, for this the statement that you include in your biographical sketch, that it should show where you're going with this, how you are building your career to become an independent, successful investigator. And I think that's the essence of writing this type of application. That's why they are so complicated. And I tell people, don't think you're going to be writing a fellowship application in 6 months or 3 months. It takes like a year to have a very strong application.
So I wanted to add something to that. I think I kind of wanted to take a step back and maybe mention that the very first thing to realize about writing grants is that the same way that when you go to the bench, you don't go to the bench doing an experiment that thinking that, well, this is going to work. Like, there's no way that I'm going to do an experiment at the bench that's not going to work. You cannot go into the grant writing process thinking, I'm going to get this grant. There's no way I'm not going to get this grant. So you have to go into the grant writing process with the idea that there are going to be rejections, and you just have to be fine with that. But what you're getting out of it, getting the funding is the ultimate goal, but you're getting a lot in the process of writing the grant. That's number one. The second thing to realize is that there's such a thing as grantsmanship. So getting your grant rejected doesn't mean that your idea wasn't good. It just means that it wasn't selected by that committee. That's all that means. And there could be a number of reasons why it wasn't selected by that committee. It could be because it was poorly written. It could be because it was a bad idea, but it could also be that it doesn't fit the goals of that agency at that time, or it's not in the right evaluation cycle or whatever. Like there are many reasons to get a grant rejected. I estimate that for every 5 grants that I've written as a PI, I've gotten one funded, and that's because my funding record has gotten much better recently. There was a point where for every 10 grants I had written, I got 1. To get my first 3 or 4 grants for the lab, I had to write 40 or 50 grants. It's not a joke. But in that process, I became better. Like I didn't have 40 or 50 ideas. What I did is that I took the same 3 or 4 ideas and kept on improving and sending them out and getting feedback, as was mentioned earlier. You get feedback, you get better, and not giving up and just trying. And I got better at it, and my science got better for it, because in integrating those criticisms into my science, actually, they were not capricious criticisms. They were like, some of them were real flaws in my thinking. Some of them were flaws in the way I was writing the grants. But the only way to get a grant funded is by trying. That's the thing to realize. So I will say that if you get away, if you leave with one message today, is don't postpone writing grants. There's no level of thinking about writing the grant that you can do that will help you get better at writing the grant. The only way to get better at writing the grant is by writing the grant. Yeah, I think I heard somebody talking. But anyway, so those are my 2 cents.
Okay. Remember to mute your phones if you're not talking to the group. So, Daniel, can you, particularly for the fellowship applications that you submitted, can you share with the fellows maybe some of what your process was and how you got help, and in what ways for those fellowship applications? So
I think the first decision is just to write it, and then you make a commitment to yourself. Come hell or high water, this fellowship is coming out. And the second part is, the second part is to start very early, as Alberto was suggesting. The earlier you start, the more you're going to learn in the process, and the less stressful it's going to be. So that's the second thing. The third thing is to make it fun for yourself. Like, use it as an opportunity to learn. That's what we are. We're students, right? As scientists, we're constantly learning. So instead of making it into a painful process of, am I going to get this? Am I not going to get this? Forget about if you're going to get it or not, and just think, can I learn how to express my ideas more clearly? And can my science benefit in the process? And even if you don't get the grant, in that round, because there are multiple rounds. I mean, this is not like you didn't graduate from high school, you're done. I mean, there are multiple rounds. They're essentially, even if you don't get it, your science will be better, you'll be better, and there'll be other opportunities. And if you keep on trying, you will get it eventually. My philosophy with these things is a grant written is a grant funded. I don't know when or where, but I'm gonna keep on trying until I get somebody. I think my ideas are good, and I think they're good because I discuss them with colleagues, and I get feedback, and I integrate it, etc. So when I write a grant, I just keep on polishing it until I get it funded somewhere. And so that's the third thing. And the fourth thing that I did for a fellowship that was actually incredibly useful for me, and it's very simple to do, but it was transformative for me, was that so let me be very clear. I sucked at writing grants, okay? And I hated it, like, because I sucked. Who likes something that they suck at? Nobody. So, but I love science. So there's a tension there, right? I had to in some way reconcile those two forces. And eventually, the way that I reconcile it is by integrating the grant writing process into my science. And one of the things that I did that was really transformative was that I found two fellow graduate students. They were my same year. And we established a kind of like a trust relationship. And I'm going to be honest, it pissed me off when they will take my grants and they will destroy it. But I gave them permission. I told them, look, please destroy my grant, and I'll do the same for you. I'll return the favor. Don't worry about it. But you have to trust this person, and if you get upset, you have to like go away and calm down, and then come back and learn. Okay, you're trying to give me constructive feedback here. Why is, like, I'm frustrated because I thought my idea was so clear, and I realized you didn't understand it. So why is it that you're not understanding it? And doing it with students have a huge advantage in that. Like, sometimes, okay, so if you write a grant and you give it to anybody, a student or a faculty, and they say, oh, this looks fine, don't waste your time with that person. Don't ever give them a grant. Don't ever give them paper. Don't give them anything, because they're just wasting your time. Believe me, your first draft is not fine. It's not going to be fine in any way. So if they're telling you it's fine, they're lying. So find somebody that's going to take the time, and it's going to destroy it, and it's going to criticize it. And it happens that if you find somebody that's a peer, they're going to be willing to spend more time on your grant than a faculty member will. And they're very smart. So you'll be able to get a lot of information out of it. And if you're willing to return the favor, you're going to be selfish about this. You're going to just have them review your grant. And then when they have a grant to review, you don't do it for them. It's not going to work. But if you're willing to do it for them, you're going to establish really strong relationships. Actually, I did it with two people that are both now faculty members. And at the time, we were all graduate students, and it created such a strong relationship that we kept on reading each other's stuff. We still read each other's stuff. One of them is at UMass, and the other one is a faculty member at Johns Hopkins. But we started as second-year graduate students.
That's awesome. So you guys, now you can share your with each other. You can share proposals and that type of thing. And I think the fact that you guys have such diverse research topics is also good, because if you can explain your research to somebody that's in another field and they get it and they get the research questions that you're trying to answer, that then you're explaining it well, as opposed to somebody that's within the field and will know all the nitty-gritties. And remember, your reviewers are not necessarily going to be people that are specifically in your field. Alberto, sorry I cut you off. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, something that happens, to me in IH is, and I think Danielle touched on this about how pertinent or how relevant to the agency or the institute is the proposed research project. And something that I don't know how to stress this on people. We have in our website, I make presentations and I tell them, before you start writing and doing all this effort, contact the program officer and make sure that your research fits the agency or the institute. I have to shuffle so many applications of people that don't check with me, and then I have to send it to another different institutes, and then, you know, it's a waste of time for people. So I always ask applicants, like, you know, before you start writing your fellowship, send me a 1 page with a brief description of the project, the specific aims, the name of your mentors, and your NIH biosketch the biosketch in NIH format. And the reason that I ask for this is because sometimes people don't justify the need for additional research training in their applications. And sometimes they think that at the postdoc level and they don't have enough publications from their dissertation. So sometimes I try to guide them, but at the same time, you get people that they just go and send the application without even checking with anybody, and then they do poorly. The other point that I want to make is the most annoying thing that happens to the reviewers is when you have problems with applications, for example, and it happens because the applicant didn't share it with the mentors. You have to make sure that the people that are your mentors read that application before it is sent to the NIH. This week, I'm in the process of reviewing fellowships, and I have seen any kind of crazy stuff happening. Like, for example, one applicant forgot to make citations of their own mentor in their research project. And the reviewers got now said, this person just discovered this, and it was a paper from last month, and this is not even here. So it was tragical.
Christine, do you want to add anything to the tips for preparing your fellowship application? Things that you maybe have seen successful Ford Foundation applicants do?
I think all the advice that's been given is really excellent advice. It's very important to understand that fellowship applications often have to be as close to perfect as you can get them, because the individuals reading those applications are their only means of getting to know you. So to have your colleagues, your classmates, those whose opinions you respect, and of course your mentor read your application and give you constructive criticism ahead of time is excellent advice from Danielle and from Alberto. I would say make sure everything that you upload, you have essays to write, and you have to upload each essay. Make sure that the one you're uploading is the correct one, that you don't upload your personal statement twice and then not have any proposed plan. Make sure your transcripts are legible. Make sure that you have a minimum of 3 references. If you have only 2 reference letters, it will not be reviewed. A question was posed earlier about what if you have multiple ways in which multiple paths that you might pursue for your life's career, and maybe teaching and research is only one of many. For an application like the Ford Foundation application, you would need to focus on teaching and research. You may have other options that you're thinking about, but if you are considering a teaching and research career, focus only on that one when you're applying to an application, when you're applying to a fellowship program that is meant to support only those who are planning a career in teaching and research. Do all Ford Fellows go into teaching and research? Sometimes job opportunities open up elsewhere, but you still have to be very focused on each application. You may decide to apply for a National Science Foundation research fellowship. Look at those guidelines, see what those personal statements that you're going to write focus on. I believe NSF has a broader impact statement. That's slightly different from the Ford Foundation's personal statement. So be aware that each fellowship program is unique, either federally funded or privately funded, and it's important for you not to upload a previously written plan of study if it doesn't fit the guidelines for that program.
Great, those are wonderful tips. Let's see, do we have any another question from the fellows?
Giovanna, I wanted to call on Susana. She asked a question on the chat that I think relates very well to what Chris just said about, you know, whether you want to do a career in teaching or research or something else. So Susana, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, I can do that. So for F31s and other type of applications in your bio sketch, you need to be very clear and precise what are your future directions in your career. Sometimes it is expected that you say, oh, I want to stay in academia, I want to be a PI. But if you really don't want to do that, what is the balance between lying and be true, or is there a line there? Is it possible?
Can I comment on that? My experience has been that the best bio sketches is not only that, you know, you don't, NIH is no longer thinking that if you have to be a PI at Yale or Harvard or a research intensive institution in order to be successful. We want people to stay in research and be part of the biomedical enterprise. So I think your commitment in terms of how you craft your statements is how you're gonna be involved in research, you know, regardless of what you're doing. There's research in industry, in pharma, there's research in government, and there's a very important program that we have at the NIH, of the SBIR, of the Small Business Program, which is for entrepreneurs. Maybe you want to have your own pharmaceutical company. I don't know, you know, Boricua Antibodies Inc. And it's something that you want to get this fellowship for. So as long as your statements is about, you know, and again, it depends. When you read the program announcements, the first thing you read is, after checking how much money they're going to give you, is what is the purpose of the program? What is the aim? What is the intention of the program? The intention of the program is, you know, for developing a career in teaching in science, then you craft your statement for that. If the idea is going into a biomedical research, then you have an infinite way of presenting that. It's not, I don't think it's a lie. It's just, you know, and we understand, finally NIH understood that, you know, academia is not the ultimate goal, particularly when the job market the way it is and how competitive it is. It's what we want is for people to pursue research in all the different elements that is part of what is the biomedical enterprise.
I have very little to add to that, but I will mention that, you know, if you were applying to law school, just to take the argument to absurdity, if you were applying to law school and you were to say, I hate law, I never want to practice law, please accept my application. Yes, of course, like they're not going to take you in law school, right? So if you write an application and you're like, I can't wait to get away from the bench, I really hate the bench, but here are my ideas of what I'm going to, yeah, that's not going to work. But because you have, like, going along the lines of what Alberto is saying, like, understanding the purpose of these grants, they're training grants, right? They're grants to train as a scientist. So if you have a personal statement where you're explaining why you're training as a scientist, whatever that vision may be, I'm training as a scientist because I want to become a, you know, scientifically rigorous policymaker studying X, Y, and Z, and I feel that I need to develop these skills. I'm training as a scientist because I want to become an entrepreneur. I'm training as a scientist because I want to become a teacher. I'm training as a scientist. It doesn't have to be an academic PI position, but it is a training grant to become a scientist. So anything that's not centered around training to become a scientist, that would be the extreme. Then that's not going to be considered. That is for sure. But if it's an aspect of the biomedical workforce, whatever that aspect may be, I think there's a lot of room there for that.
Great. Do we have another question from the fellows? If not, I'm gonna ask, go back to something that Alberto brought up, which was the mentor, and not just a mentor, but the scientists or scientists that might be advising the student in the development of the fellowship proposal. How important is it to have a kind of a group of advisors for the development of the proposal, and then for the actual, how the proposal is going to be viewed by the reviewers? And anybody that wants to take it, feel free.
Do you want me to start? So for the NIH, and this is the advice that I give people, NIH allowed to have team of mentors, right? And I always recommend people, there's no a single person that knows everything. Actually, we're moving into having team science approach, so the more people that you can see as mentors, the better. For a fellowship application, it's important to, these people that you consider sponsors or mentors are first very well-funded people, because the fellowship usually gives you just, the stipend and a little bit of money for travel and resources and supplies. But it has to be people that are really well-versed and they are really experts on your field or the field that you're planning to go into. And they have to be people that are going to be willing to write a letter for you, specifically writing what they're going to do for you, how much time they're going to have for you, what they're going to teach you, how they, for example, I tell people, sometimes you need like a technical mentor or on a person that is this expert on a specific technique of intervention that nobody else can provide that training for you. So that person will be a technical mentor. Then you have maybe a career mentor, somebody that is, established enough, that has been around the block for a while, and it's gonna guide you in terms of where to go and your pathway. But the most important thing is to demonstrate in the application that the people have the expertise. I have seen situations that people include mentors that are not necessarily the best mentors for them, because first, sometimes they are so famous that they have no time. And second, and these people, the reviewers even Google people. So they will check, they know how many people they have in their labs. So they know they don't have time for you. Then also, sometimes people just have mentors just because they have money. And then the research project they're not really experts in the research project. So the worst thing that can happen is a reviewer saying the mentors this individual have are not the experts in the research project they're proposing or in the training program they're proposing. And then you get those kind of comments. What'd you do? How do you go back to your mentors and you tell them, guess what? You're not as great as you think you are. And, how you tell that to Danielle? So what you do? You take the summary statement that the NIH sends you, and you invite Danielle to have coffee and say, I want to share with you my summary statement. Oh, by the way, this is highlighted here. Can you suggest somebody else? So you have to, it's part of your development of your network and your trust in people, that sometimes you have to drop them because they're not the best mentors for you.
Just to add a little bit to that, I will say that a team of mentors, in another extension of what Alberto was saying, is that a team of mentors in general in science is a good idea. Like, no one is an expert on everything. And you can think of the fellowship as an opportunity to establish formally that team of mentors. But if in order for it to really be meaningful, both for the fellowship and for your career, it has to be something that is consequential. It cannot be like a dressing type of thing for the grant. It cannot be a last minute, let me get 10 letters from 10 famous people that don't know me, because it's gonna be obvious. I mean, what makes sense is to establish the relationships, to establish the mentoring relationships, to be purposeful in thinking who will be good mentors. And then when the time comes to write the fellowship, to formalize it through in your mentoring plan. I think that's the way maybe that it was intended when it was created. And this is particularly useful if your PI is starting off, or or if you're gonna be using, if you have collaborators, or if your PI is not like, if they're transitioning between techniques or career or funding or whatever, like it's particularly useful.
Great. So it's an opportunity to establish meaningful advisory and mentoring relationships, particularly if it can benefit the research and yourself, but don't just add them just to add them, right? Omar actually had a question that brought up a lot of really good comments on the chats, and I want to bring it up so that everybody can think about it and listen to it. Omar, do you want to talk about, ask your question out loud?
Yeah, of course. So my question was actually helping my mentor at R1 for funding, and she already has an R1 and some money. So my question was, is it really necessary, or it will be recommendable to write my own fellowship, and how the reviewers of the fellowship will see these already R1 as an independent research? How would it be viewed?
What is your role in the R01?
Sorry?
Are you going to be listed as a co-PI in the R01, or you're just helping, the draft of the R01?
Yeah, I'm helping with the draft, yes. And it's part of my project. It's also going to be part of the R01, yes.
So definitely you need to get your own fellowship.
Okay.
You have to start developing your independence.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's not mutually exclusive. Like the way the fellowships work is you can actually propose ideas that are presented as part of a larger research program. So, I mean, what you don't want to do, let me be very clear, you don't want to copy paste the aims, okay? That would be plagiarism. But you can develop your ideas in the context of what the lab is doing, which is hopefully, and it's understood, is hopefully R01 funded. As Alberto was mentioning, actually, that is preferred to have a PI that has an R01 funded program, and then you develop your own ideas in that context, a subset. It's not going to be nearly as large as the R01, but it's going to be your own project. And there are a number of there are reasons not to do it. Okay, so let me be clear. There might be practical reasons not to do it. So if you are about to write 4 papers that in this year, and it's between writing this fellowship and writing the 4 papers. I'm not talking about 4 papers in your imagination. I'm talking literally. You are sitting in front of the computer about to submit like a body of work that you've been working on for the past 5 years. You sit down with your PI. You might make a strategic decision. Okay, let's focus on these papers before we get scooped, or because it's good for your career now, or because this is your 6th year as a graduate student and we need to publish them, or because it doesn't make sense for you to get an NRSA or whatever when you're finishing up your PhD. So there might be practical reasons not to do it, but those reasons aside, I will say, like there's a saying in Puerto Rico, right? La oportunidad la pintan calva. It's like every opportunity you have, just grab it. Like for any fellowship or unless you have something better to do with your time, meaning for your career, meaning like the example I just gave of the paper.
And you also have to realize that, an R01 is a 5-year project, and fellowships don't last that long. So it depends on where you are in terms of you're completing your PhD, you're going to get a fellowship probably for 2 years, 3 years maximum. So as Daniel said, you have to gauge you know, where you're going to invest your time because you want to get your degree, you want to finish your research project, and you want to publish, because then when you move into the fellowship for the postdocs, your publication record is going to be part of the review criteria. So you don't want to have those papers, you know, what is the thing that people usually write in preparation? That's not work. That doesn't work anymore. No, it's published. So you have to gauge how you want your participation in that out of one, and that's something that, you know, it can be also training experience that your mentor is actually giving you by writing one of this, but doesn't mean that, you know, if they're gonna submit it like in August, and if you're almost done, you probably won't even be in the same lab by the time that out of one gets funded.
Yeah, I also wanted to bring Christine into the conversation as well, and specifically to talk about what some of the maybe more intangible benefits are of applying for and getting a fellowship. I know that particularly the Ford fellowships come with a lot of additional good things. So maybe Christine, you can talk a little bit about that.
Yes, I was thinking, as Alberto was speaking, I was thinking that someone who part of their funding was provided by an R01, perhaps if they were at the dissertation stage or ready to apply for a postdoc, they might choose to apply for a Ford Foundation fellowship. And there are intangible benefits. First of all, the fact that you worked on an R01 will be seen as a strength by the reviewers when you apply. We always encourage those who apply to list all of their awards. Some people feel that they may appear to have had so much funding that it will put them in a separate category of someone who doesn't really need additional funding. What happens though is that the reviewers look at previous funding as this person was provided an opportunity and used it well and knows how to seize an opportunity and take advantage of it. So more often than not, it's viewed in a very positive light. In the Ford Foundation Fellowship Program, there's an annual conference of fellows. The first 2 years, each person is guaranteed 1 year of attendance at the conference, but it usually works out that they attend for 2 years or sometimes more than 2 years. You develop professional associations at the conference. You hear about job openings. There's a Ford Fellows listserv, and it's a closed listserv, and it's for just Ford Fellows. And so opportunities are listed there, conversations take place there. There are many ways in which an individual is mentored by colleagues through the Ford Fellows listserv. The Ford Fellowship Program also has a system of regional liaisons, and we have 2 liaisons in Puerto Rico. They are available at their contact information is available at our website. They have stated that they really want to be available to applicants, but also other individuals seeking professional advice. And so I know for a fact that many individuals contact our regional liaisons and get good career advice about preparing a fellowship application, how to prepare a competitive fellowship application. So there are many benefits, and certainly if you're listed as an alternate, you didn't get the award, but you came very close to getting the award. If you were deemed worthy of honorable mention, these are things you can put on your resume for the future. And panelists and faculty members are very aware of how competitive the applications are. Generally, at the predoctoral level, only 3.5% of the individuals who apply are awarded the fellowship. So Danielle's advice to keep trying, be persistent, apply again, is very pertinent, because so many people receive the letters saying, we just could not offer you a fellowship this year. That many times, it just is not an indication that you were not worthy of support. You could be totally worthy of support. An excellent idea, a strong application. There just was not sufficient funding to award all the deserving candidates. So I think rather than go on. I'll interject other ideas as they come up, but I think the advice given here is just tremendous. I think Alberto and Danielle have given wonderful advice.
To the point that you were making, Christine, I was actually a runner-up for the Ford. I didn't get it, but it was in my resume for a long time. I actually benefited from it. All those fellowships I did Ford. I mean, they're very prestigious. Everyone should try to go for them. Like they're a big gold star on your, on your notebook or your resume. And so I didn't get the Ford. I didn't get the NSF, but I kept on changing the application and sending it and changing it and sending it. And eventually I got one from the Gates Foundation and I think I got it because they were starting and they didn't have many applicants, to be honest. I wasn't very good at writing these applications, but I improved. That's how I can have a lab now. That's the only way to.
My first fellowship was from the Patricia Robert Harris Fellowship. Have you ever heard about that one? It was established by Congress for minority students. And basically you have to write your life plan on it. And what I did, I just wrote basically my dissertation, the whole dissertation research that I was doing. It was, once you get a kind of award that kind of, shows people that you can do stuff, it really helps you out. It just, the same when I started writing, when I was a faculty member, I started writing applications. I started with a $18,000 research award from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation.
The thing to realize, and this is very important, I think if you take any PI and you ask them to write a resume of all the applications or papers they have gotten rejected, it will be, I will estimate, 4 times longer than their actual resume. Okay, but this is like basketball, right? Like they only count the baskets that you make. So you just have to keep on shooting the ball. And unlike basketball, there's not one ball. There are a ton of balls. So to stand with a ball in your hands, afraid of shooting it, makes no sense. Because there are a billion balls in the court. You just keep on grabbing them and shooting them and grabbing them and shooting them, and you'll get better. You get better at it, believe me. And certainly, like we've been talking more about the NIH because that's what's on my mind. Like I have a grant that's actually due next week. That's the one I was showing. I have an arrow one that's due next week. And that's what's on my mind. But all these private foundations, they're fantastic. Everyone should go for them. They're usually short grants. If you get them, it's a home run, and you cannot underestimate the value of the networking that Christine was mentioning. It's super powerful. I was a Damon Runyon Fellow as a postdoc, which is one of these private foundations. Many of the people that I met in that fellowship are faculty now, and we know each other very well, and we've known each other for now like 10 years, and we've helped each other out like in different ways, just like reading each other's papers, giving advice with reagents. It's really, really fantastic, and the Ford works like that. And the last thing I'll mention also is the NIH has other mechanisms that, so I strongly encourage people to apply for the NRSA and these other fellowships, but be aware also that there are other mechanisms like minority supplements. If your PI has an R01 or a similar mechanism, you can write your own fellowship under that R01. And it's an opportunity to kind of get your feet wet, as they say. It's an opportunity to write, to write with your PI, write something. It's low-hanging fruit. Usually they do give them, and it will cover for your salary and a few supplies. And also they do have conferences depending on the institute where you can learn more about grant writing and things like that. It's a great opportunity. There are lots of opportunities. Just take advantage of them. Don't think about it. Just do it.
So to that point, I think if it's okay with Lynn-Marie, she had a question on the chat. Lynn-Marie, I'm going to ask it and also tweak it a little bit. So Lynn-Marie has a NSF Graduate Research Fellowship. Is that correct, Lynn-Marie? Yeah. But she's been counseled to apply for a Ford dissertation fellowship. So question number 1 is that possible? And question number 2 that I wanted to also open up to the group is more broadly, you know, what's the difference between a graduate fellowship, a dissertation fellowship, a postdoctoral fellowship, and also in terms of the timing? When is it that you should be thinking about applying to each of those? So Christine, first, Wilmari's question, can she apply for a foundation dissertation fellowship? She also mentions that one of the reasons that she's been counseled to apply for that is because of the great listserv network that Ford has.
I thought the question was going to be about applying for an NSF as well as a Ford, and I'll just interject here that there are individuals who win both and they're able to alternate funding. So the very first year you apply for a Ford Award and you get the Ford Award, you have to be in graduate school that September on Ford funding. But if an individual had previous NSF funding, they could put their NSF funding on deferral and then use the Ford Award the first year that it is awarded. This is a bit of a different question, though, and it has to do with when is the right timing to apply for a dissertation fellowship from the Ford Foundation. The dissertation fellowship is meant to support the final year of write-up. So it's important for you to read our brochure, make sure that your program of study is aligned with the guidelines for our program. An individual who applies this fall could start as early as June of 2017. If they start in June of 2017, they really should be finished by summer 2018. So when an individual applies at the dissertation level 2, they have to have all the requirements completed. They have to be ABD, all the dissertation. They don't have any requirements remaining, institutional requirements remaining. So by the time you're ready to apply for a Ford dissertation fellowship, it could very well be that you have already completed 3 years of NSF support. I'm not sure about that, but the timing is very important. The panelists really want to fund the final year of write-up. So if you still have 2 years remaining, you're probably applying too early for a dissertation award. They clearly do want to award individuals whose supporting documents, letters of reference, give evidence that this person, the amount of time that they will be on the Ford Fellowship, 9 months or 12 months, will be the final 9 or 12 months while in graduate school. Each of these fellowship programs may define their funding a little bit differently. In the Ford program, we name the pre-doctoral fellowship for the fellowship that supports an individual while they're in graduate school. One of the reasons, one of the requirements is that the individual have 3 years of pre-doctoral work remaining. 3 years, the school has to actually complete a verification form stating that this individual could potentially use 3 full years of support from the funding agency. And as I stated, the dissertation award is for the final year of write-up, and then the postdoctoral award is for individuals who at the time of application, which would be November for this year, November 2016, they already have the PhD. Yes, they do have the PhD. And they're within, you can apply for the postdoctoral fellowship if you are within 7 years of receipt of the PhD. So someone who's held the PhD degree for 8 years, for instance, would not be eligible to apply. So it's important to remember that it's basically an early career award, and it's meant to provide you with an opportunity to make new professional associations. So there is an advantage if you say, I got my PhD at one university, but I want to move on now. I want to try something new, try a new approach, meet new people, let other individuals get to know me as a professional, and make new professional associations. So Giovanna, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was great. Very thorough. Thank you so much. I wanted to also maybe throw it to Daniel, since you mentioned, I think it was in the chat, that for the postdoctoral application, it depends a little bit on where you are, what stage. Can you talk about, like, should you apply for a postdoctoral fellowship before you've received a postdoc, immediately after getting to your postdoc lab? What are your thoughts on that?
So there are different mechanisms, and I suggest just applying. Again, my philosophy with this is apply frequently, apply regularly until you're funded, until you're funded. So in terms of the postdoc transition, there are few things that are, so if you're looking for a postdoc, there are two things that you can say that will help you enormously to find a postdoc. The first thing that you can say that's most important is just be specific about why you want to work with the person that you're interviewing. So if you're specific about why you're interested in that person, then that makes a world of difference. Like, I get emails every day being like, "Dear sir or madam, I'd like to do a postdoc in your prestigious lab." And look, the person didn't take the time to figure out my gender. Like, why would I take the time to figure out why they want to come to my lab? Like, so if you, it's very different from a letter that says, "Dear so-and-so, I'm interested in your lab, in your research program and then specifics." That's the first thing. And the second thing is that if you say, if you tell the person when you're interviewing, one of the things that is important for me is to have the experience of writing my own papers and writing my own fellowships. And if you're going to like a serious lab, that makes a big difference, because that's what they want to train you to learn how to do. They want to train you to learn how to write papers and how to write fellowships and get your own funding. So once you establish that, if the person makes an offer for you to come to the lab, you already have the beginning of a conversation to start writing your own fellowships. And there are at least three, there are more, very prestigious mechanisms to get for fellowships starting on, where you don't need any data. You just need kind of like your ideas. And there, what's most important is your publication record as a grad student, like Alberto was mentioning. One of them is the Damon Runyon Fellowship, which is more cancer-centered. There's the Helen Hay Whitney. There's the James Coughlin Child, and there are others. I think the Ford has a postdoctoral fellowship also. The NSF probably has several postdoctoral fellowships. Then there are the NRSA programs, and depending on the NRSA mechanism, you might need some data that the PI might be able to supply, or like some level of like grounding of what you're trying to do. There are, of course, diversity supplements. And then for later stages in your postdoc, there are transitional grants that you can apply to, like the K99 ROO, and those type of grants that allow you to become much more independent, finish your postdoc, and start your own independent career.
If I can add something, because I manage the F32, which is the traditional, conventional NRSA postdoctoral fellowship that you use as your first postdoc. And I get that question about that when I should be applying to it. I said, you should be applying to it once you have secured your postdoc, because your postdoc mentor has to write a letter. That's your sponsor. And it has to come from the institution that is going to be the applicant institution, which is your institution, that the one you're going to do the postdoc. The other question that I get a lot, I say, can I stay with the same mentor for my postdoc with the one that I did my PhD, or should I stay in the same institution? And this is my answer for, unless you can justify that you cannot get any more research training, and this person is the only person in the continental US and its territories that can teach you and the new techniques or the new things in your postdoc, then you say, try to defend that to the reviewers. The same with the institution. Remember, these are research training programs. So part of your training is creating and experiencing new people and new things and new institutions. So I don't tell people no, but I let the reviewers tell people no. Because I think it's worth, if you think that there's no other person in the world that can teach you, then go for it. And in terms of the data, reviewers are getting more and more strict in terms of seeing preliminary data for the aims that you're proposing in the fellowships, both predoctoral and postdoctoral. So it's a great idea, but you have to demonstrate that project is feasible. they're looking into that. Yes, there are projects, there are programs that can help you develop that preliminary data. Using a diversity supplement is the way to do it, but the diversity supplement program is transitioning into becoming, is a transition program now. So as part of your supplement, you need to be telling the us that how you're going to be transitioning to mainstream NIH research training funding. So for example, for a diversity supplement, I expect not only a great development plan, a great project for you that is aligned with the scope of the patent award from the PI, but also a transition on how you're going to use this to transition into a fellowship, for example. Because they are not forever. They usually are 2-year supplements, and 2 years go really, really fast.
Great. Those are wonderful insights. So, Lynette, you had a question. Do you want to ask it?
Yes. So the question was about what Alberto just mentioned about preliminary data for submitting a grant. So I learned when I was writing my fellowship that we needed a lot of preliminary data. So my question is, how do you know, let's say as a PI, as a young PI, how do you know that you have enough preliminary data to submit a grant and not find out by submitting the grant and not going through the process and then finding out, oh, the reviewers told me I needed more preliminary data. So when do you know you're ready to submit?
It depends on the programs that you're applying for. For example, we have an NIDCD, a program that we call Early Career Research Award that doesn't require any preliminary data. It's a program that is actually giving you money for your pilot project. But there are not that many programs like that right now. I see a few of them every day because now it's becoming into more accountability. So in terms of, I think it's working with your mentors. And in what stage of your career you're asking for this fellowship or these career development awards. It's demonstrating that the project is feasible. That's what, and that you can convince the reviewers that this is something that is going to move the field forward, and that you have enough data that is going to be something that is going to be publishable in the future.
Okay, one quick question. Do you think it would be okay to, because you mentioned that it would be a good idea to call the program officer before submitting. Do you think it'd be a good idea to let them know how much preliminary data you have, or is that not?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, because, they, even though, we don't have time to be reading the whole application, and we cannot review your application before you're submitting it. You can let them know, what stage you are, and then how this preliminary data, for example, from AIM-1 is going to help you into moving into AIM-2, and it's going to be a building process, but at the same time, the AIM can stand by itself.
But the whole issue of preliminary data is part of so there's an issue of preliminary data in terms of the granting mechanism, but it's also, there's a major issue in terms of the grantsmanship, which is an important aspect of grant writing that you learn as you are preparing your grant. So for example, in your case, you got feedback, and now it's in the back of your mind, and now you'll integrate it next time that you have to write a grant. And you also get a sense that if you have too much data there, then you're not really proposing something, you've already done it. And there's a sweet spot there, which enters, again, this realm of grantsmanship. Much like when you're writing a paper, for those of you that have written papers or read papers or seen papers produced from your lab, they don't follow a chronology of how the experiments were done. They follow a chronology of how the biology happens. So in grantsmanship, you are proposing a logic of experiments that represents a body of work and showing a data that is going to be able to substantiate what you're proposing. But it's an art form. You don't show everything you have. You're careful. You're guarded. You have to propose it at the right moment. It's like it's like a meal for which you have all the ingredients, you started cooking it, but also it's not done, because if it's done and it's getting cold in the table, no one is going to want to eat it. So it has to be just the right timing, and that timing, that requires skills and to learn how to do it, and practice.
And mentors.
One question: is it safe to say that, like, if you have 3 aims in your grant, is it like, I realize that maybe 2 of the aims are already done? Is that how the majority of, like, how research funding runs? Like,
so if you have 3 aims in your grant and 2 aims are done, and you write that they're done, then you're not gonna get the grant.
but you don't tell them that they're done.
Okay, so but if they're published, this is where if it's published or not. So if they're published, then you're not gonna get it. Now, there are always more experiments that you can do. Okay, so this is kind of like a gray line, and this is where the grantsmanship and the mentorship is very case specific. So I don't want to make generalizations here that are gonna confuse people. But let's say that I did an experiment and I have some preliminary data. And now the NIH actually, regarding this preliminary data, is a major issue. It's a major point about reproducibility. And I sent a link earlier about some books that you can buy that I really recommend them. They're really awesome. They're mostly for R01 investigators, but they have some other books there for more general grants, and I really recommend them. They're excellent. They're like workbooks. So you read them and you kind of work through it. And one of the things that they talk about is this major effort at the NIH with preliminary data. Let's suppose that you did an experiment and you have a trend, but your N is kind of low, or your statistical significance is not that great. Well, that's an experiment that you can propose, because you say, look, I have some preliminary data that suggests that this is the case, but sticking to the rigor of Landis et al. Yada yada yada, I really would like to. One weakness with my study is that I did my studies in male mice, and I should do them in both male and females, or in white mice, and it should be brown. I don't know. You kind of, so that's grantsmanship. And then you kind of develop it. The stating your grants, stating your ideas in writing is very valuable, but not everything you're gonna write is gonna necessarily work the way that you're doing it. And some of the stuff that you're gonna write maybe is already done, and you don't want to spend more time developing it, because it's kind of like, it's an opportunity cost. Like, it's an experiment that, sure, you will do it if you had all the resources in the world, but does it really make sense to do now that you know this other piece of data? And everyone understands that. But if you don't have the skills to be able to explain your ideas at that moment in a way that they're appealing, then people are not, they're not going to be able to understand why it's worth it to give you whatever. Like, a fellowship is, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why should they give you hundreds of thousands of dollars and not another person? When you're sitting on those study sessions, that's really the equation that you're looking at. You're not looking at, does Lynette deserve hundreds of thousands of dollars? That's not what people are asking. What people are asking are, I have 50 applicants and I can only give 10 of these applications. So who are the people that best explain their ideas that are deserving of this application? Now, as an individual, you're receiving that information and thinking, oh, they don't like me. But it's not about you. It's about you in the context of that cohort and your ideas about how well they're expressed.
Another point for that is that, you talk about having 3 aims on a fellowship. You have to be careful because you don't want to be overambitious. You have to be within the timeline of how doable, for example, 2 aims that, as Daniel said, not everything is going to go as you're proposing. So you need to also explain, what if you're saying, this is my hypothesis, this is the way I'm going to do it. Well, I have to include in that application, but it doesn't work this way. I need to look and present also alternative ways of doing the experiments to see if that hypothesis is the correct one. So the last thing that you want to do is to ask for so many aims that suddenly they're going to say, there's no way she's going to be able to do this in 3 years. And again, it depends on how much data, and you need to use your mentors, in terms of, this is, ready. If the mentor is telling you this is not ready for publication, that means that you don't have enough data.
Yeah, good points. also, I guess, don't underestimate the reviewers, right? You don't want to, write up something that maybe somebody already knows has been done, or, that's definitely shooting yourself in the foot. I think if nobody else has a comment on Lynette's question, maybe Carlos, you had a question. Do you want to ask it out loud? Is it Carlos? Nope. Anybody else have another question? I was going to ask, so, you guys mentioned a lot of different postdoctoral fellowships, Damien Runyon, Helen Hay Whitney, Jane Caulfield, Patricia something. There's so many postdoctoral fellowships, but is there a good place for someone to go look for them? Have you come across any databases that would be useful for the fellows to have handy?
In terms of NIH, it's true. There are a lot of foundations. There are a lot of even scientific societies are doing fellowships or career development or startup programs. So it depends on your field. But the NIH have finally revamped their training website. Believe me, for me, it's like the best thing that happens, because finally they have something that you can get all the information about all the fellowship from just one website. It's NIHtraining.gov, and you have everything there. And the good thing from that website is that it doesn't matter your discipline, is because it covers all the different institutes. And then you go into the institute that you are interested, and then you see what's available there, because some institute has special programs, like somebody was mentioning NCI. We have 2 new programs that are specific for us only. So it's just a matter of doing your research in terms of, what is out there. If you're interested in NIH and you have no idea which institute is available for you, use the NIH reporter. And if Monica, you can post the link for the NIH reporter, because there you put, it's a searching tool that you put your keywords, and you will see not only, who's doing the research, how much money they put in, their publications, their program officer, the institutes. They have all the information out there for those reporter, and it's great for the NIH.
Christine, do you have any other resources you want to share with the fellows?
Well, we have this fellowship roundtable, and we have a list of many organizations that belong to it. We meet twice a year in May and September, and there are many different opportunities listed on the membership list of the fellowship roundtable. We also have lists of resources at our nationalacademies.org/Ford website. And then universities themselves often have lists of fellowships. I'm thinking of the University of Michigan. I'm thinking of Cornell University. You don't have to be a student at those universities to see what opportunities they're presenting to their own students. In addition to this, if there are professors whose work you admire and is closely aligned with what you are interested in, many faculty members' CVs are readily available. So you can look at someone's CV who teaches in a field that you're interested in and see who funded them for their postdoctoral experience. You may end up having multiple sources of support for your postdoctoral work. You may have a 2-year postdoc from one source, and then you may apply to another source that provides only 1 year of funding, but you need 1 year to complete the research that you started with another funding agency. So there are many, many different lists of fellowships. There are many different ways to obtain names of fellowships that you can apply to. There are international fellowships as well as domestic fellowships. So I would say to approach it as if it's a research project and list out the ones that appeal to you and the ones that really excite you, the ones that you really want to pursue, and just tap every resource you can think of, especially your mentors. They will know the names of fellowship programs where they've directed students and the students have been successful getting funding.
Very good. So we have about 10 minutes left. Is there a really pressing question that anybody has to ask the panelists? If not, then maybe I'll just open up the floor to the panelists and say, ask you if there's any parting comments, parting observations you want to leave the fellows with.
I'll just say that I don't think there's a single scientist in the history of science and grants that has not been rejected from a grant. Okay, so everyone gets rejected. Even the best scientists in the world get rejected. There are tons of stories about that. They get their papers rejected. It just happens. So I think losing the fear of rejection is an important part of being a scientist. The same way that losing the fear of an experiment not working is an important part of being good at the bench. Try frequently, try often. It's a skill. No one is born with it. You at least have two people here that sounds like I speak for Alberto and I when I say that we both really sucked at writing grants. And and look, we learn how to do it. Like one of them is actually directing the granting programs now, and my lab survives on grants now. Like I have to raise most of my funds, and now I help. And two of the postdocs that are working in my lab have NRSAs from the NIH, so I have to help them write their own grants. And now it comes a little easier to me, but it didn't. Like it's like learning how to give talks also was a struggle for me at the beginning, but you just learn how to do it. And once you learn how to do it, it's like, you know how to do it. So you just do it. And these are opportunities. And one thing to realize, there's a certain level, I just want to put this in the open, there's a certain level of entitlement when one thinks that one should not be rejected from a grant, or that one is bad when one gets rejected from a grant. Because the truth is that we're very privileged to even have the opportunity to apply for grants, and to not take advantage of that opportunity because you're afraid of being rejected. It's entitled, just calling it by the way that it is. Most people do not have this opportunity, and most people do not have this many doors available to them. So I think that it's important to take advantage of those opportunities. If anything, at least to honor those that opened the doors, that made these opportunities available to you.
That was very nice, Daniel. What I can tell you, fear of rejection, I'm an expert on that. I've been rejected for so many things. So it was like, it's not easy being one of the, first brown person in an institute at the NIH. So, you don't take yourself seriously. You're going to find people that don't like you because you sound different, because your accent is too strong. I remember the day, because I heard it so many times, that I started a presentation at one of my institutes, and I've been at the NIH for 10 years. And the first thing I said was like, I had to excuse myself and apologize for my British accent. And everybody started laughing, and people actually pay attention to what I have to say. So that's one thing. The other one is use your mentors. Do an introspection about what are your needs, where you are, where you see yourself, because that will help you create your plan. Apply, and fellowships are extremely competitive these days. Particularly my institutes, the number of perfect scores that I see lately is impressive, but I have a leadership that is very committed to training. At the same time, the people that resubmit, probably is like between 85 to 90% of them gets them the second time. So, do it again, address your reviewers, And, you know, if you have the credentials, the publications, the training, and you know where you want to go, and you know what you need, you have half of the fight, you know, you want it already. It's just a matter of finding a way and a style that is fits you and it has all the elements to have a good application coming in. Email us, let us know, and we can help you out.
Go ahead, Christine. Do you have?
Oh, I was just I'm being repetitive here, but I think the points are so important. I think what Alberto said about persistence, I think the individuals who are persistent, who keep their eye on the goal and keep reapplying, I think that's a very important advice. And also for Lynette, I think I kept hearing both from Danielle and from Alberto, lean on your mentors. I think you should be able to go to them and they should give you advice about whether or not you're ready to be applying for a grant. And I see a real openness with Danielle and with Alberto. I think sometimes that is an area where one has to be persistent and almost risk being a pest about it. But really, they have knowledge. Many of them have served on committees where they're deciding fellowship awards. They're deciding who gets the grant. So they bring a wealth of knowledge, and they really need to be sharing that knowledge with you. So I just applaud Danielle and Alberto for the advice they've given, and certainly you demonstrate an openness and a collegiality that I hope the students will experience in their graduate programs, because that really is key to making things work well. So I thank both of you for the work you're doing. And Alberto, I don't know if you remember or not, but we were on a panel together once, and the next time I asked you to be on the panel, you were too busy. You had picked up so much more responsibility at NIH, you couldn't take them, but you gave me the name of someone that I could invite. And so thank you very much for that.
Well, count on me on the next one. I promise you I'll be there.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Alberto, Daniel, and Chris, for your amazing insight and advice. I think I speak for all of the fellows when I say, you know, it was really valuable. All right, everybody. Thank you again for attending a chat, YCA chat. We'll see you guys in July for the next one. Good night.
Good night.
Bye, guys.